off this project here, Phil Howerton, and so I want to turn it over to Phil. Give him a warm welcome.
Yes, we've introduced a new word in literature, haven't we? Chaptology. And I thought it was a fairly clever idea. Chapbooks often don't sell very well. And sometimes anthologies, if you have an anthology with 100 and 150 poets with one or two poems each, even their friends and family might not buy a copy of that anthology. So what we're looking at here is making a hybrid where we put a little more spotlight on each poet. So what we have is an anthology that has chapbook space for each poet. And if you looked at the book, it's kind of broken into the chapbook. We have chapters, a little chapter heading where it's clear we're giving everyone their own space. So this is a really cool place. Not very many towns this size have a bookstore at all. And also a great place to hang out. It's a good combo. So I guess I'm the opener tonight. I'm warming up the crowd for the Rolling Stone. Does this work?
That actually does work.
You might come with Agnes Reed, you might come combine some. So we're going to have literature class tonight. I'm going to read a couple of poems by a couple of the other poets and 5 or 6 of my own. And sometimes the poetry readings, if there's a crying baby, or if there's cars on the highway, or in Baxter County there were people running up and down the stairs behind us. Sometimes if you miss a word or a line, you're sitting there thinking, what is this poem even about? I've lost my pace here. So got a little handout for you.
Thank you.
Even got some study questions on part of it. And I get the feeling this is a crowd of poets, right? I heard them questioning you about you going to read here or there.
Right.
Musician over here. No.
Knitter.
The knitter.
Artist.
Artist. That's it.
Yes, knitting is a fine art.
Thank you for those.
I said rebel rouser. That's everything.
So the first poem here, put a little wand up in the right hand corner. It's hard to tell which is the front or the back on one sheet of paper. You know, it's the staple in the corner of the paper that really grounds the entire universe. If you don't have the staple in that left hand corner, it's hard to know where to begin. But we'll start with Visit. This is the one of the poets in the collection.
Phil, would you scoot back a little bit? I have to crane our necks because you're tall. Thank you.
Paulette has a lot of nature-based poetry, certainly not all of her poetry, but I have a few questions we'll ask after I've read this. We got a lot of poets here, so I expect some good answers. This is entitled Visit, and I like to say visit or is it? I think by the time we're done with this poem, the title may become a little ironic. When the rooster roused us, the sun was already splashing through the blinds. Hens pecked chiggers in the thick-filled yard, and guineas flocked to the fir tree. The daddy longlegs crowded beneath the awning, each with its beady body and slim walk. Grandma picked one up and asked it which way the cows had gone. One of the legs pointed toward the pasture, so we began asking them other questions. Where to find treasure, which way home, where our parents were. And since it's a group full of poets, I don't have to point out there's some wonderful alliteration in this poem. If we were in high school, I'd give you the job of underlining some of that. But the rooster roused us, the sun, and the interesting verb splashing. What a great verb for the sun to splash through the window. An interesting thing I think in this poem are the family of words. We have related words that create a mood or an atmosphere. And sometimes it's automatic, and sometimes we break that rule to draw attention to something unusual. But this is a visit to Grandma's house, and as Grandma's used to, they all live in the country. But so you can help me pick out some family of words that sets the country, rural, down-home atmosphere. We've got rooster, roused. I don't know if that's a country word or not. Hens, pecked, chiggers, tick-filled, and the interesting word there I think is yard. We all have yard sales, but if you live in town, you probably mow your lawn. If you live on the farm, you probably mow your yard. I think yard might be a little more vernacular. Guineas, flocked, fir tree, and then of course we have granddaddy longlegs. And an interesting thing here is how she engages folklore, but engages it somewhat in a comic tone, because if you have a granddaddy longlegs, there's going to be a leg pointing every direction. So, yeah, it's going to tell us where the cows have gone. And in the closing stanza here, I think she does something Miller Williams suggested in not every poem you write, but you sometimes need to throw your reaper through the windshield. And we have this happy little poem about visiting Grandma until that last line, or almost that last line, when we turn from maybe the giggles of the folklore, looking at the granddaddy longlegs, to where to find treasure, which way home, where our parents went. And how quickly you turn from having fun with Grandma and looking for hidden treasure to, well, where's our parents? Any other comments here? This is Writer's Workshop.
Which way the cows had gone? Of course they went to the pond. The parents are skinny dipping to the pond. Where's the treasure? In the pond.
You never know what you're going to find in the pond.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you may find Grandma in the pond. But I think by the time we get to the end, we realize the title's kind of ironic.
It is.
Yeah, you've gone to visit Grandma, but how long are you going to be there?
I'm impressed by the chickers in Shakefield Yard, just the combination of the two. Because when I moved to Missouri 10 or 11 years ago, first thing Bonnie told me, ticks.
Stay on the sidewalk in the summertime. Oh, the chiggers and the ticks, and of course a lot of people keep guineas. Guineas keep the ticks down in the yard. The problem is guineas think they're a wild bird and they spend more time in the woods than they do at home. Ducks. Ducks are also good, but ducks are pretty messy in the front lawn. Another poem we wanted to look at, we've got some questions here on the side. We may want to ask, like the ACT, you might want to read your questions before you read the passage. What are some definitions of stray? Stray, like many words, is both a noun and a verb. Identify the verbs as we go through. What do you notice about those verbs? And you're writers, you don't need anyone telling you what to do with your verbs. And the movement of the wind, what might the wind be? And what might be the something? So this is stray. This is Amy Wright Vollmar. Wind along the bluff chimes high in the sycamores, wheezes through slots of caves in the throats of chickadees, stirs the dead asters. Something comes bounding with golden seeds and thorns woven through its fur, to rub a cold muzzle against my hand, follow me home. And some definitions of stray. You can take it as a verb. It means to wander. Sometimes we wander away from something we shouldn't wander away from. Sometimes we wander away from things we should wander away from. Wandering is you're going about aimlessly, maybe without a purpose. The noun, stray dog. Maybe we're all astray at some time. We feel like stray. Any other definitions? Or you got a good definition? You Googling that?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
I don't know about definitions, but I might have ended the poem in dead asters.
Well, that dead asters is an interesting line.
I think it's my favorite line in the poem.
And there's a lot compressed in that line, isn't there? And what we have here, of course, if you're thinking, writing about nature, how do I approach writing nature? This is probably the oldest approach to the book, because this is what we often do with nature. You know, Thora went to the pond for 2 years, sort of. Some of us, when we're down or troubled or depressed or want to get away from kids or away from the TV, we might take a 10-minute walk in the park. But how many times do we go to the woods, to the wild, to nature, to kind of refresh ourselves? And that's probably the oldest approach to nature, and that's certainly what's happening here. But let's notice the movement of the wind. The wind along the bluff chimes high in sycamores, wheezes, notice those strong concrete burrs, through the slots of caves, the throats of chickadees. So one thing, the wind is coming closer. Something is coming closer to us. We go out into the can't really say the wild. God into nature is something that is approaching us, something that's coming closer. And it stirs the dead asters. So if we look at the wind metaphorically, what might the wind be or suggest? That's a good line. You know, it could be happiness approaching you. It might be a stretch to say this breath of life or the breath of rebirth. You notice that we have the Lazarus effect here. It stirs the dead asters. You have dead flowers, but the wind breathes through them and brings them back to life. That's a great line. Now let's see if the poem offers anything after that. But something comes bounding. And what might that something be? I think I've already provided a couple answers there. It might be happiness. It might be my better self. It might be Robert Frost stopping by woods on a snowy evening. I look at life and look at my troubles and realize of course we had that moment in the poem. Robert Frost goes home in his sleigh, not his sled, in his sleigh. And of course, here she turns and goes on. But something comes bounding. Literally, we'd say it's probably a dog. I think Amy told us, and when she wrote the poem, she was thinking of her imaginary lion that she believed in when she was a child. But when we look metaphorically, once again, it could be happiness, it could be our better self, it could be our better mood. And I think this is a very common happening with most all of us. We occasionally walk into wilderness. I know Agnes does, in reading her books. Amy does almost in every poem. And we come back home feeling a little better than we did before we left. That was my dad's answer to most any problem I had when I was a kid. I was brought up on small, work-intensive, old-fashioned dairy farm. And anytime I didn't feel good, even when I had appendicitis, it didn't work for that. It worked for almost everything else. He'd say, well, go get the cows. It's time to go bring the cows. And usually by the time I got back to the barn with the cows, I had forgotten whatever I was whining about. So I'll read a few poems here. Unfortunately, I don't know how many of you are farm kids. These are all kind of farm and rural based. You know, we write what we know. We've always heard that having as writers, write what you know. I can't remember if it's Philip Larkin or who it was said, well, that'll take about 15 minutes for most of us. That's smart of it. Well, whippoorwill. And I saw a statistic the other day. Whippoorwills have increased by around 70% since the early 70s. So here are the whippoorwills, ironically, who may have been singing about themselves. And I pulled a little folklore from Vance Randolph and some other folklorists here. But we've all heard a little folklore that a whippoorwill that comes to your house and calls outside your door is not a good thing because it's predicting the death of someone in the house. And of course, if it sings long enough, it will be true because everybody's going to die at some point. Folklorists report that it was believed to be the call of death, though we never held such superstitions, and welcomed it when it came to call at dusk. Beginning its chants in shadows of woods, it would flutter closer and continue its vigil in the path, leading from the back porch to the barn. And I would lie awake and watch the shadows of walnut leaves on the wall, and listen to the slow breath of my sleeping brother, and to my parents talking each other to sleep. And then I would drift off, wrapped in the belief that it would be forever before any of that life would pass away. And of course, you recognize pass away is awful euphemism for death, isn't it? And that life did pass away. And of course, all of us, our childhood is past. And poor little whippoorwills, it may have been foreseeing their own death. A prickly pear. You know what a prickly pear is? It's an Ozark cactus. And if you have one, you should take care of it because they are every bit as effective on a burn as an aloe plant is. I burned my thumb really bad this winter on my fireplace. And just a couple of days before, I'd read that in an Ozark herb book. And I thought, I wish I had an aloe plant. I've got a prickly pear in my backyard. Amazing how well that works. So, don't eat too mean for your prickly pears. And I transplanted a prickly pear from my mother's pasture to the gate by our lawn fence. And it was just a little piece of it. I had it in a bucket, but it's really is really spread out.
It's ready to bloom. Just
And
the
it's
next-
ready to blossom. It'll have probably 300 yellow blossoms on it in the next few years. So this is my prickly pear. And it's an unusual thing to be in the Ozarks or in Missouri. It should be far southwest of these hills. An oddity here. It must have thrown itself flat among the rocks as glaciers retreated to avoid being dragged away. It maintains that instinct and presses itself to the ground each winter, and deflates and darkens and wrinkles its pads, and like a woodchuck, slows its pulse and drops its body temperature, and with needled fingers clutches cast off leaves, like an old widow clutching a faded scarf. But in spring it rises from its leaf bed, arching in arms, a living Stonehenge, cupping each passing sun and pressing that warmth of the brilliant yellow blossoms, each melting away after one day. And then it spends the rest of summer taking one cat-like step due south. So it is slowly crawling south. Every summer I can tell it's moving a little further south as it expands. And when it tries to go north, I chop it off. It's trying to come through my yard fence. Grabs me by the ankle every once in a while. Red buds. Most everyone has a red bud tree in their yard. And they're kind of a messy tree. Limbs are always falling off. You know, they grow out in strange angles and breaking down. And the first time you mow your yard each spring, you've got to prop them up and pick up all the dead limbs. So here I was asking, why do we put up with red buds? They only bloom for a short time, you know, a couple of weeks and they're gone. And I found an answer to that, and it connects to King Lear. So, the red buds. Oh, let me not be mad, not mad, sweet heaven. Surely we tolerate and cultivate them for more than their brief purple beauty, where they fade into shade of taller trees and shadows of their heavy heart-like leaves, where they spend the remainder of time hardening themselves, twisting and torturing their trunks, ranging the limbs out in impossible angles, as though begging wind and ice to break them. Then they grow mad and gray, shed shingles of thinning bark, go hollow, and we find them in early spring where they've thrown themselves prone, exhausted and spent in their despair. And we prop them up with a cinder block or a cord lid, as they remind us of what we must not allow ourselves to do or be. So they may be there to remind us you can't let yourself go mad. So, I don't know. While cleaning the shed, now I was whining just a moment ago. I was brought up on a small work-intensive farm, and my main sport I played when I was a kid was hauling hay. That was our hauling hay and milking cows. But during the summer, we were in the hay field, and that's back in the old days when you had the square banks. We spent most of the summer in hay field until it got too dry and hot. Then we'd cut wood. That's a fun thing to do in the summer. We'll work at the sawmill. But
That sucks.
one summer, my dad decided, probably at the urging of my mother, she was often saying, those boys aren't going to be boys forever. He decided to take us to the river fishing. So for a couple of weeks, every night when we were done milking, we went to the Nine River. And we had this old rowboat, not a canoe. We had an old-fashioned rowboat with a tongue and groove pine floor and a tin-sided, not the aluminum. But it was an old rowboat. So it had 2 oars, not a paddle. So this was a true experience just a few years ago after my dad died. I was cleaning one of my dad's sheds, and he had sheds of junk. So, behind clutter, leaning against the back wall of the boat oar, one of a pair, older brother shaped from an oak board, more than 50 years ago. For 2 weeks that summer, Dad took us early from hay fields to night fish the river. Nights of floating under and on a stream of stars, tying limb lines, listening to countless choir of minute mouths, peering into silent depths, and then falling asleep by lantern light. The boat rotted away decades ago. The river is ruined, but this lone oar rode steadily on its side of the gunnel, bending a weight through time, until it circled back to my hands and nudged the boat's bow upon this far bank of memory. Bloodroot is another plant in the Ozarks. I'm guessing it's in mid-Missouri too. It's a little plant, kind of a wedge-shaped leaf, has a white blossom, kind of like a daisy. And if you pull it up, the juice in the root looks like blood. There's all kinds of Indian stories, you know, they used it for war paint. Who knows? But very common plant and blooms early in the spring. And often what we do with nature poetry, we connect nature to people. So here I'm kind of using this little plant as an implied metaphor for some of the old folks who lived in the area, the Ozarks that I'm from. So I'm talking about the plant, or am I talking about the people? It prefers the moist lower slopes of rocky wooded hillsides, suspicious and tight-lipped. It offers a single blossom for only one day, white and daisy-like, and then remains a single leaf wedged low out of the earth, hiding its joy among the ground cover, but throbbing from root tip to leaf tip with blood, drawn from the thin soil to which it clings. Persimmon tree. Now here's some more nature. Everyone's familiar with the persimmon tree and probably know some folklore about persimmon trees. Some people actually claim to like persimmons. I don't know what's wrong with those folks. You ever ate persimmon? Okay, I'll pass. And of course, if you split the seed open, if it's shaped like a spoon, it's going to be a snowy winter, is that right? Or I can't remember. It'll be a mild winter. A knife, it's supposed to be what, cold and icy or something. But if you break open enough seeds, at some point you'll find all three. So I play a little bit with folklore, but between my house and the university where I teach, there's a persimmon tree in a person's yard. And I had walked by there hundreds of times before I realized that's a persimmon tree, because it was there by itself. It was growing on an open lawn, and it, of course, it was in town. It didn't look like a persimmon tree because it wasn't in a grove of others. It was there by itself. So one morning I thought, that's a persimmon tree. I hadn't even noticed. So I worked on this poem, and it didn't seem to be going anywhere until I started talking to the tree. And I think when I started talking to the tree, things really came together. I passed by several mornings without recognizing her, for she appears to be a cultivated shade tree. You know, she's sitting there. Cultivated shade tree, having shaped herself to fill a place in the lawn, and no longer hemmed in by a grove of kinfolk who remained back home, feeding possums and raccoons, boiling bitter jelly and splitting their seeds to predict winter. But now, when meeting early mornings, before the city people are awake and watching, we greet one another, discuss the weather, study the gathering clouds, listen for calls of the rain crow, and avoid any mention of home. Anyone who writes about nature is going to write about buzzards. Do you have a buzzard poem? No. Okay, I looked through. Now she has an assignment. I know Wendy has one that she's proud of. I think she read the buzzard poem when we were at the field station. I read of Ted Kooser. He's one of our favorite guys, isn't he? He has a great buzzard poem. Well, here's my buzzard poem. Not the black vulture. We've got a lot of black vultures down south. The good old turkey buzzard. And this poem is didactic. There's a little humor, there's a little silliness, but this is an old-fashioned poem that teaches a lesson. I think maybe we need more of those these days. And I think the moral is, if a buzzard can be thankful, the rest of us probably can. Have you ever thought about a buzzard's life? Eating roadkill. Throughout the summer, they roosted in a dead oak on my neighbor's back acreage. And now in November, the relations flock in, congregating, contemplating a move farther south. Their sleeping quarters and coasting circles have grown crowded, yet they hesitate to leave town. Perhaps the rent is paid up until the end of the month, or they are waiting for Uncle Baldy's brood to glide in. Most likely, this lingering warm weather and their rare avian sense of smell has convinced them that the season of death is not ended. And I see them each morning perched on bare limbs, their dreaded red and raw faces facing first rays, and since dreaded no voice to sing, they hold their wings half raised, accepting with silent grace grace given. That's all I will bother you to see. turn to the Rolling Stones. And I don't think I probably need to introduce our next reader.
No.
Hometown girl here.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Phil. And so Phil brought two of the other folks in. I can't stand having stuff in front of me. So it's nature poetry, and I'm going to read you a few of mine, and I'm going to start with one that was the closing poem of my last collection of Oracle for Dreams. It's a good point to start. It's called Witch Hazel. I have not written in a long time. There's too much to say, and I do not know where to begin. Let me just tell you what I did today. I fed the cat, sat with my coffee cup, and watched the sun rise. I went to the woods. It was cold. I found frost flowers at noon under deep blue Ozark winter sky. I walked by the creek to the old mill, little more than a shack. The water rushed down red rhyolite rocks, and the witch hazel have started to bloom. They smell so lovely. I hope they are blooming where you are too. So some of you know some of those poems because I read some of them at open mic, but so you know I'm a hiker and a kayaker, and sometimes we have adventures with creatures. And I want to read you two poems about adventures we have with animals. This is called Ferrying Turtles. On the logs the turtles dry in the sun, cooters, map turtles, sliders. As I approach, they drop one by one into the river and swim away. A box turtle is swept along, bobs up and down, helpless, wiggles her feet and stretches her neck, trying to keep her head above the water. I reach her with my paddle, scoop her up, she slides off with a splash, and floats further, disappears under a downed tree, reappears, struggling downstream. I overtake her, grab her by the shell, and plop her into my kayak, ferry her to the shore, carry her inland to a patch of grass. She takes off swiftly, no signs of hesitation or bewilderment. Someday, she may tell the other turtles about her encounter with God. And this one is about the heron that keeps flying ahead of you, and because of the repetitive motion, I've chosen to make this a play too. He looks at the clumsy creatures and their colorful kayaks floating down the river. He can sense their excitement. In their colorful kayaks, they gesture and point at him. He can sense their excitement. They rest their paddles, drift, gesture to be silent. He lets them come closer. They rest their paddles, drift to where he stands on the shore. When they come closer, he flies further downriver, lands on the shore, waits, takes off, his great wings beating slowly. He flies downstream. He can play his game with the clumsy creatures. With slow beats of his great wings, he can fly away. They float down the river. Oh yeah, and there's another one that has animals in it because my husband and I, we say any day you see an eagle is a good day, and I think you all agree. Any day you see an eagle is a good day because it means you got to get out there where the eagles are. I have lost something I cannot name. I go to the river and wait. Perhaps I will find it. Perhaps I will learn to do without. I go to the river and wait. I have nothing to do but to pay attention. I will learn to do without the daily clutter and clamor. There's nothing to do but to pay attention. Paying attention is a remedy for the clutter and clamor in my mind. I watch a snail on a lobelia lip. Paying attention is an antidote for apathy and sadness. I watch the snail on the lobelia lip, its translucent shell a perfect spiral, and forget apathy and sadness. The wood duck leads her ducklings close to shore. The snail's shell is a transparent spiral. The ducks weave through the water willows, led by their mother close to shore. An eagle perches on a sycamore. The ducklings hide between the water willows. The eagle sits on silence. He unfolds his wings and lifts off from the sycamore. I have forgotten what I had lost. I saw an eagle, unfolded my grief, found something I cannot name. So there's not just untouched nature in the Ozarks, there's also rich history of immigration of humans living there. So I want to read you a few poems that deal with that. Pioneer Cemetery. The path is overgrown with river oats and briars. Few come here. A row of sandstone slabs, tinged green by time, tilted by the weight of decades. No names, no dates, no record of lives faded into history. Only the oaks stand watch, and in the spring, anemones adorn the ground. Stopping by Welsh Hospital ruin. If you're a floater, you've been, you wanna float the current, you float by Welsh Spring. Stopping by Welsh Hospital ruins. Barred window holes, giraffe rock walls, field stones, irregular in shape and size. Never a tortured place. Just clean, moist air, failing lungs breathing hope from the cool cave. The doctor died. His project crumbled. Only ghosts now dwell in the empty shell. The spring still gushes from the underground, choking cold. The water still rushes to swell the river. So this doctor built a sanatorium for people with asthma and lung troubles because they thought breathing the cave air would cure them. But the place was very, very hard to get to back then, and so it never really took off, and then he died, and but you can still see the ruin. It's almost June, and one of my favorite flowers are the daylilies. Even though they're not native and they are considered really invasive and they spread, but I admit I still love them in the ditches. And this poem's called Orange is the Color of Joy. The lilies in the field do not toil nor spin. They work the alchemy of blooming, distill sunlight, water, and air into an orange miracle. In ditches and fence rows they flower with abandon, throats open wide. As summer fades, the lilies tire. Willpower cannot halt the wilting of leaves. The lilies retreat to their roots, feed on sugar stores, dream of blossoms, emerge in fierce independence next year. So it is decreed. I'm trying to find some that I haven't read here because so about a little more than half of those poems in my chapter of this chaptology, great word, Phil. A little more than half are new and have never been published, but the other half, a little less than half, they're in some are from Coors Land and some are from Coracle, and I know that most of you know those. So I'll pick the ones that are not in there. Lectionary. So a lectionary is a book that has, it's a religious thing. It's in church. It has the lesson for the day, the reading of the day. Open the lectionary of the forest. Find chapter and verse for each season, each moon cycle. First full moon after equinox, read the maples. Consider their luminous leaves. Observe the process of letting go. Feel it deep in your body. Listen to the wind preach a sermon. Hear the yellow grasses rustle. They know the secret. So do the bats. Go to the river. She whispers words that are missing in the dictionary, roars them in her rapids. With enough patience, you can see the wind whittle the sandstone, see autumn slide into winter. Nobody will solve the riddle for you. Perhaps the riddle has no solution. Perhaps the puzzle box cannot be opened. The forest of gramophones. The lake is a woodcut, black and white, wind-carved zigzag reflections, the dark silhouette of the far shore. In the shallows, the lotus thrives, water beads on the large round leaves that float, anchored to the muddy bottom. Closer to shore, the stalks rise higher, leaves curl to trumpets, a forest of gramophones playing inaudible music. We only hear the blue jays shriek in the distance and the swish and drip of our paddles. So if you go to Council Bluff Lake, if you launch from the Enough side, and there's a little town called Enough, so there is this, it looks like a forest of gramophones. I have pictures. In each November we go to the Lake of the Ozarks to watch pelicans passing through the Ozarks. When they had feasted on the abundant fish and preened their plumage with their great beaks, the pelicans took wing over the lake, their sunlit bodies white before the blue, their squadron an undulating ribbon waved by wind, swinging higher and higher and out of sight. I'm going to read you two more. They're short. What stories they whisper. So I try to learn to identify the trees in the winter when they don't have leaves. And it's actually not that easy, but also not that hard because they have their characteristics. And I found out that when you break a sassafras twig, it has this really, really special smell, and that really smells like the cologne my grandmother used to use. So there's this poem, What Stories They Whisper. I've learned to tell sassafras by its fragrance. It smells like my grandmother's old cologne. Leafless, the trees reveal their skeletons. The sycamore reaches her naked arms over the creek. Oaks clutch the air with gnarled fingers. My hands linger on alligator bark persimmon. Dry leaves still cling to the branches. They rustle, listen. What stories they whisper. I want to finish with this poem that at the end contains a wish that I want to wish for all of us. Interruption. The birds scatter. A large winged shadow swoops, settles on the dead branch above the feeder. The hawk surveys the field. When he flies off, the branch bounces up and down long after he's gone, and the chickadees are already back, chirping and chattering as if nothing happened. Oh, that we may so regroup after peril, return again and again to our ordinary lives. Thank you so much. And we have copies if anybody is interested in picking up a copy.
What is the sassafras smell? Because I know not the branches one, but it has like a fruit smell.
I don't know. I mean, the branches smell like.
It smells like root beer. That's the reason called root beer.
Okay. So, how's everybody feeling? Do we want to take a short break before the open mic portion? We have a few. We have a few readers. Let's take a quick break. There are bathrooms. Thank you so much, Ken. There are books. If anybody wants to buy a book, please do that.
You have to do something that's about
And then we'll start up in maybe 10
I'm
minutes
gonna try that.
or 20, so that I can bring you home. Sign my section, and maybe Phil can sign his
That'd
section.
be great. Super.
It is. I don't like to sign in the front since it's not just me, but
Understand.
pennies and it reproduces.
We've got a variety of things.
That's not our best issue. Last year's issue was real issue.
Correct.
But, Amy's got what's in there. It's a good issue, but
It's beautiful. I love when they do like I'm associate editor for Kimball, and we do online districts and Zoom clients for the
we still like part-time. I know we were doing a long time, all these prints will go away, but yes, occasional work, someday we'll but
Yes.
people love to get part-time.
I love reading, something that people enjoy. I love publishing in online land because then you can put the link on your website, and if you like pitch something or contact somebody who says, hey, I would like to read for your series or apply, check out my work, here's a link, here is kind of a portfolio.
Good network.
So I like it for that because then you have a work sample out there, people can check you out and see if you budget. Because you all know how I never acquire something that needs to be when I started. I'm reading for
Some of the worst years in our poetry magazine.
It's almost
two
done.
different journals.
Okay, Tony, are we ready?
Such a variety.
He said 2 minutes, so I figured this is 2 minutes. So, here we go, open mic, and we have a bunch of people, and we're all the usual suspects, and I think everybody pretty much knows everybody else. So, let's do it differently. Is there anybody who would like to start? If nobody wants to start, then let's turn to John Clayton and have him start us off, and he's gonna stay in his seat, so we'll all just turn around and.
Okay. I usually read from my iPhone, but for the first time in 5 years, I left it at home. So you get the blessing of me trying to remember some poems, and one that I found in my car. So at least you're gonna get one that's right. I'm going to try to do a couple. One of them is, this one's called Columbia Regional Airport. I grew up, well, my last year of high school was at Ashland, near the airport. As I sat in the Columbia Regional Airport, waiting for the arrival of flight UA 5840 from Chicago, I remembered when I was 17, and this land was a soybean field surrounded by brush piles and multiflora rows. I sat in the east window of the Berkshire house and watched coyotes worry a brush pile. I wondered when fear and intimidation would cause the rabbit to abandon caution and make a run for it. But run to where? Just another brush pile or clump of multiflora rows, so another cycle of intimidation and fear could begin? The largest coyote jumped on top of the brush pile and began digging and yelping. Could the coyote reach the rabbit by scratching at the limbs? Who knows? Fear and terror are great motivators. Too much for this rabbit. It was 30 yards from the brush pile before the coyotes even knew it was gone. 200 yards to the creek bank, and coyotes were gaining. From above, a shadow. Talons reached forward, the rabbit screamed and was airborne. The coyotes stopped running, milled around looking confused as they watched their almost meal disappear into the wild blue yonder. The rabbit was disappeared by something it could not see coming. There are no more soybeans, no more brush piles, no more multiflora rows, no more rabbits. Only concrete, cars, chain link fences, stone and metal buildings. The only sounds are the sounds of cars, a loudspeaker no one can understand. The sound of rubber hitting the runway and the whir of automatic sliding doors. There's no more animal life, no more rabbits, only little dogs dressed in colorful clothing, tugging at leashes held by old women. All the Cubans have faces pinched with anxiety and uncertainty as they wonder if today is the day they will be disappeared by something they cannot see coming. Thank you. The next one is about where I live. It's called the home place. The old clay bricks of the chimney blend in with the rusty brown tin roof. Turkey vultures like to perch on the peak on sunny afternoons because it's easy for them to hitch a ride on the breeze coming up the hollow. Spent goldenrod glisten silver in the autumn sun and hide the shallow well where a family of 12 got water for cooking and cleaning, except in August when it would go dry and they had to carry water up the hill from the spring. The old house only has 2 rooms and a lean-to on the east side. All the doors have rotted off, but that green roll roofing on the sides is held up pretty good. The garden spots between the house and the barn, it went a long way toward feeding all those kids. And among the rocks, the dirt's still black. Mom and Dad died years ago, and 3 or 4 of the kids have passed too. They all grew up and got the hell out of Dodge because there was nothing here for them on this hard gravel farm where the soil is thin and the rock ledges run right out to the surface and blink in the daylight. Like most Ozark youngins, they left Marys County searching for fame and fortune in other places. They've been gone for years, but lately they've started drifting back in. Some with good pensions earned in more progressive places, and others without much more than Social Security. Well, at least it's cheaper to live here than it is in most places. There's nobody left that gives a damn about this old place, except maybe me, and I didn't even grow up here. Thank you. This one is the one I found in our car today when I got here. So I'll be needing my glasses to read it. This one's called Willie and the Kid. I know many will say I'm a bit presumptuous writing about someone I've never met. I suppose there is some truth to that. However, in my defense, I have listened to the kid talk incessantly about Uncle Willie, talk with admiration, awe, and love. They met when the kid was 15, and she was just dropped off at his house where he was licking his own wounds. She claims his first words to her were, "You hungry?" That is a typical vet reaction. Triage. Take care of the most immediate problem and then move on to other things. Willie has been the kid's wingman for over half her life. He's always been there, watching, listening, watching out for the kid. He hasn't always agreed, but he's always been there. They developed understandings that are important to them. For example, truck rules. What the hell do you suppose that means? Well, I'm sure they know what it means. I know the kid loves Uncle Willie. She's never said the word love to me in talking about him. I don't know if she's ever told him she loves him. I know she does. When she talks about him, I can see it in her eyes and hear it in her voice. I don't know if Willie has ever told the kid he loves her, but I would bet my life that he does. I don't know Willie, but I know old vets. An old vet would not spend 20 years tending a relationship with another human without loving them. Old vets don't express their feelings out loud, but that doesn't mean they don't have those feelings. Old vets get their feelings hurt. and their heart's broken just like everybody else. They just don't talk about it. And they're better at hiding it than others. The kid says she and Willie had a fight, and he's done with me. I don't know about a fight. I don't know what it was about or what was said. I do know old vets. An old vet might pull back, might be mad at her, might avoid her, might not talk to her for a while, but he will not stop loving her. Don't ever make a mistake of harming her because you think he doesn't care. That mistake could leave you with a smiley face under your chin. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And Chaser, would you like to read us some poems?
Okay.
Jason, why don't you also make an announcement about next Saturday? Why don't you do that? What you want to do?
Oh, yeah. I think we're going to have impromptu reading here. Saturday, 7 o'clock. Mac's going to come back in, and then he and I are going to hit the road for a bit. So we just kind of thought we'd see what happened if you guys want to come back. I know it's a lot of Saturdays for 1 month, but I think a little tiny bit later just because he's going to be getting off work. And burn the rubber to get into town.
Are we starting today? Or?
Yes, Saturday,
20th.
20th. No, I'm not busy at all. It would seem that the wind is searching frantically everywhere around town for something it has lost, or hopefully for all of our sakes anyway, merely displaced. And someone is hitching for a ride out of town, out by the highway, and somewhere there's a somber man playing a rather convoluted variation of Russian roulette with a pillowcase full of revolvers and a sad radio that isn't doing itself or this guy any favors with its woeful repertoire. Man, spin, click. Radio, spin, click. Man, spin, click. Radio, spin, click. Man, spin. Suddenly the phone begins to ring. Wild circumstances and poor decision making. There was a time, and not that long ago, back when I still couldn't get enough of anything. When you could never have convinced me things could get any lonelier, more cosmically, existentially bleak and bottomless than a sleepless summer night in a small town you thought you left behind you a long time ago, but never really quite escaped from, no matter how many miles and years you put between it and you. And now you've somehow got yourself knocked back into its gravitational bonds again, via the classic and ever reliable combo of wild circumstance and poor decision making. And there's the lone hometown hot rod hero still out there after all the years, squealing away from a traffic light that has barely turned green, we can imagine a couple of streets over. And then a truck out on the highway trumpets its response in solidarity. And maybe even a train somewhere way off gives its horn a quick little Morse code tap. And then it all settles back down to nothing but a dog barking down the street, wondering what all the excitement was about in the first place. And of course, you've already found that aimlessly surfing around for something on the TV or the radio to save you, even if but for the moment, only makes it all worse. I'm in a happy mood tonight, I'm sorry. A moment of clarity. Just a worn down and twisted spoon trying to take a break from the thankless and exhausting job of measuring out all the moments of our lives, both little and large, good or bad, Just an old dusty cobwebbed whiskey bottle, its wild hell-raising days long behind it now, sitting in the middle of a bare dining room table. A shriveled spider in its belly, a glow-in-the-dark skull ring wrapped around its neck, a single plastic rose poking up through its mouth and out into the wide, weird world. And then there is this ancient wooden chair, barely holding together under the strain of its own weight. Like high school, somebody says. Like church, says somebody else. Or maybe a little more like the kind of chair one would find next to the back alley door of an all-night diner in which many souls have sat for a much-needed smoke break over the years.
New book of yours?
It's old stuff. Dug up. Skipping your 10-year high school reunion,
This is definitely.
which is it's a really old book. About old things. Then there was that time me and Big Earl Corby were out there on Highway 4, driving around just like old times in his primer gray pickup truck. It was somehow still holding together and running after all the years, with a 12-pack of Schaefer Black Label, but one of the other old reliables and one of those basic standard issue Panasonic boom boxes. Also, somehow still holding together and working despite the wear and tear that everybody had at some point back in junior high or high school in the late 80s, before presumably moving on to bigger and boomier things. And an old cassette tape, once again still somehow working despite the odds, with black flags rise above on one side and the dead Kennedy's fresh fruit for rotting vegetables on the other. And we'd flipped that tape 4 or 5 times by then that day, just retracing the old back roads we used to explore way back when we had nothing better to do. And yes, sir, it was damn near like old times. This could be one of my first poems from my stay at OAC. It's called The Pig Less Traveled. If you find that you've come to a place seeking enlightenment, change, or merely asylum, maybe even the minimal requisite velocity necessary to break the gravitational bonds of your own life, and you find yourself one morning, 6 or 7 a.m., drinking coffee and staring off at some arbitrary point on the horizon, and suddenly a man in a truck drives up, a man who has the mildly deranged look of a man all too familiar with the revolving door of the incarceration process, and he asks you if you'd like to help him catch a pig on Highway D. And even though you're only wearing boxers and a t-shirt, and you haven't even had more than a couple of sips of coffee and no time to think at all, you say, yes, of course I would.
That was a good orientation for OAC.
He didn't ask the one man who would have helped him chase that pig. I would have done it.
Apparently he got it later too.
And Phil, Jason is a guy who runs Spartan Press, and so you might.
We've already started plotting to overthrow in southwestern Missouri. Or southeastern.
Okay, Ray, would you read us something, please?
Yes, alright. I'm gonna read a few things from a couple different poets and also a little bit of me. But this is from a project I'm doing, and it's possibly gonna be worked into a book. And it's some collage work of a poem of Scott Wanberg, a friend. So I'm gonna read this one called "The Crazy People." The crazy people are here to stay, claims ostrich perspiration in today's meandering times. Sometimes I can understand ostrich's tortured style, but this morning the telegraph refuses to sing and somebody ate all the cattle. Nobody can be that hungry, Sheriff Dung Peyote told an alarmed horde of overwrought news people. The crazy people never really left. They just became scenery. Tell no lies before their ripening time. Bow down under a star careening out of kilter. The crazy people know all the right passwords. They have the key to the private stock. And this is a piece from a young poet. This is a poetry zine I did in 2003 or 4. And this young lady, she's a 16-year-old poet from France that I just knew from live journalism before Facebook. And I've since lost track of her. Keep looking for her occasionally because she's very talented. Okay. When I first met her, my mother was a blur of dirty white and pale pink. The cold softness of sheets or the dead skin of a snake falling off her hospital bed. And I, a loud wet fish, swimming through this fog, thick as the soup of my ancestors' bones. She had hair that tickled my face, and big breasts, the taste of women, of birth, that lingered on my tongue until I could speak and eat of the blues and purples of my own words. Where's this childhood of half syllables and dirty nails? When the waves didn't mean the cold water a Catholic priest threw at my face, somewhere in the tall churches of Lille, or the distant echoes in a seashell. When I could still find the ocean in my sail was not the cheapest bus to the nearest British city. But now, in every bathroom, I lay my head on the tile floor, wrapped in towels and skin like a strawberry-stained blanket, while she drowns her wrinkled hands at a sink. Of dirty dishwater, with cut hair and empty breasts, I am coughing up how my palms fit the bowl of her hips and how I always want to draw a line on the wall around her face. Because someday I will lie under city skies and see my own reflection in the depth of my throat, along the concrete curbs I sit on when there's nothing left to say. I will finally lose my mother to the prettiness of Lille, foreign sidewalks and loud boys, to days that make me dive like a fish and climb like a dream. I'm going to read some me.
Some new me?
Well, it's from some of the newest me. It's in the last year. And I don't think I've read it. Isolating myself en masse in a faded digital society where our shadows run the town. We gather for drinks at the low bar, all watered down and in shallow cups to match the masturbation mouth sound. Humans get so lonely at times that they'll buy season's tickets to the dopamine circus. Like and subscribe to my channel today. This is I wrote a few real short little bits while I was burning some leaves last fall. And this one is for the karmicidal maniacs, working that ledger to the bone, a fine figure of death and rebirth. Fur needle fire, alive with dead expressions, joining in the song of everything, hot notes jumping on the winds inside. If they're much like bell peppers, I imagine the leaves of autumn are sweeter, deeper into the year, a loss of that bitter green. You destroy solid ideas, feeding on your own wind, consuming yourself in a circle of stones, smoldering. The bee explores dilapidated ruins of empty soda cans, squeezing blood from stone. The smoke from the backyard fire pit dances, wiggles, and performs like this is its only and last chance to be seen. And finish with a little E.E. Cummings. G, I like to think of dead. It means nearer because deeper, firmer, since darker than little round water at one end of the well. It's too cool to be crooked and it's too firm to be hard, but it's sharp and thick and it loves. Every old thing falls and rosebugs and jackknives and kittens and pennies. They all sit there looking at each other having the fastest time because they've never met before. Dead's more even than how many ways of sitting on your head your unnatural hair has in the morning. Dead's clever too. Like POF goes the alarm off and the little striker having the best time tickling away everybody's brain so everybody just puts out their finger and they stuff the poor thing all full of fingers. Dead has a smile like the nicest man you've never met who maybe winks at you in a streetcar and you pretend you don't, but really you do. See, and you are, my, how glad he winked and hope he'll do it again. Or if it talks about you somewhere behind your back, it makes your neck feel pleasant and stupid. And if Dead says, may I have this one? And was never introduced to you, say yes, because you know you want it to dance with you and it wants to, and it can dance, and who cares? Dead's fine like hands, do you see? The water, flower pots, and windows, but they live higher in the house than you, so that's all you see, but you don't want to. Dead's happy like the way underclothes, also differently solemn and inty and sitting on one string. Dead never says, my dear, time for your music lessons. And you like music and have somebody play who can, but you know you never can, and why have to? Dead's nice like a dance, where you dance simple hours and you take all your prickly clothes off and squeeze into largeness without one word, and you lie still as anything in largeness, and this largeness begins to give you the dance all over again, and you feel all again all over this way men you like made. You feel when they touched you, but that's not all, because largeness tells you so you can feel what you made. Men feel when you touched them. Dead sorry like a thistle fluff thing which goes landing away all by himself in somebody's roof or something, where whoever heard of growing and nobody expects you to anyway. Dead says, come with me, he says, and why ever not, into the round well and see the kitten and the penny and the jackknife and the rosebud, and you say, sure, say like that, sure, I'll come with you, you say, for I like kittens, I do, and jackknives, I do, and pennies, I do, and rosebuds, I do. Thank you.
Okay, I think we just have one more person on the list. That would be Ken. Anybody who was, Caitlin, did you change your mind? Okay, so Ken, please read us some of your work.
Sure. Okay, let me see.
It's good to be back.
John, kudos on memorizing your poems or remembering them. I mean, my memory's so bad that I forget something that I wrote a couple days ago. And a good example is, last weekend I was having an online conversation with a friend. We were talking about poetry. And he told me a story, so I wrote a poem for him. And I wrote it in the comments. And this website's notorious for being faulty. And so I went to copy and paste before sending it, and it froze everything. I had to rewrite it. It was like starting over for me. So I'm going to read that. He's a musician and a cartoonist, and he talked about his experience when he was 6, his brother was 8, and his brother was 10. The three of them were wandering, and they wandered into a club. And a poet was reading. It was a dark room. Little Stevie, for Steve Keeter. 6, going on 60. He walks into darkness, and nothing is the same again. The words of one touch the soul of another, a creative spirit already born, yet waiting for a light that will explain the meaning held in that darkness. Well past 60, he remembers that club and the poet who spoke. The words are long lost, but the thought of a heart willing to open itself to those willing to listen stayed with him, came to life as his fingers talked to his guitar or created images that spoke to him from out of the darkness. Just happened to have that because I read it at Combo on Monday. a series of poems about any extensive traveling. If I'm by myself and I'm listening to music, I include it in poetry, and I talk to my phone and just transcribe it. And I talk about what I see or what's on my mind, where we're going, and that sort of thing. And I was listening to Monk with Coltrane, and doing a classic off minor. Monk spars with Coltrane, weaves around and through him. They roll along amid lightning strikes that illuminate the dark sky. Mist rises from the road's surface in this dusk of mid-afternoon on a gray April day, with light rain that is reflected, multiplied, rises to join the mist from the tires of passing cars before joining the sheen of the road's surface in my headlights. The sky before me opens to reveal a road not so dark and hazards behind me. Monk's piano never off, minor discordance trails off to better roads. And thinking that you might be reading a heron and an eagle poem, I brought a couple, and well, they're short, mine are short. So, camera shy. Kayak approaches, heron on river's edge, almost in camera range. Giant wings beat, gone downriver. Kayak rounds the bend, heron on fallen tree, away and gone. Missed opportunities. Crows laugh again and again. And there were crows that day. And I don't often see crows when I'm kayaking. And an eagle. Curiosity satisfied. An eagle bald along a river, narrow, late in the season. Not circling near the bluffs, hundreds of feet above my kayak in the wider river. Coursing along this stream, 30 feet above me, pausing every quarter mile. Camera ready, I paddle behind, hope to get a photo. Perched on a branch 20 feet above, as if waiting. It's back to me, it turns its head at my approach. 100 feet away, then 50. Shutter rapidly firing. I pass beneath it, watch it take flight. Curiosity satisfied. Mine and the eagles. And then I'm gonna read through for you. So, my collection, Glass Awash, which came out from Spartan Press in November. Long term short. Hidden in the pockets of my mother's dreams, surrounded by the accumulated lint of a faded lifetime, are dusty memories, sharper than this morning's breakfast. When her eyes close, one final time, will her last vision be of those gathered around, or of those who've peopled her dreams? And Solace for Theseus. It's a love poem. Solace for Theseus. Even daylight can fail. Unexpected turns, a dark passage leading to one closed door, opened to a landscape shifting with each breath taken. A winter plain, starker than any waste. Your kiss on my cheek, soothing warmth. Confined in a desert canyon, your touch a healing salve against an unforgiving sin. That must be sun. Under darkened skies, your eyes blazing the way, unraveling the thread of this labyrinth. Thank you. And finally, linear freedom. Somewhere beyond the lines that separate us, outside the angles they form, beneath the layers and complexities they create, lie the course of a line that we imagine, one that erases all other lines. A simple curve, a circle, yet free from restraint, that enables us to escape those layers and complexities that stifle us as we imagine a better place, one that excludes none and holds all. Thank you. That should be it. Although I'm thinking of something. Yeah, I don't have it with me. All right.
That was such
Thank you, everybody. I love
a
this.
nice sentiment to to close us out, to replace for all. John, was that the announcement that Jason?
Yeah, just that we will be here next week at
So-
7 o'clock. It's sort of a pop-up event. It's nothing that I had planned. Jason got a hold of me a day or two ago wanting to do it because Max can be here. So if anyone can be here next Saturday at 7 o'clock.
You're gonna make a Facebook event so people remember. So next Saturday, then the big one is June 17th.
June 17th.
Do you start at 6 or do you start at
We're
4?
starting at 4.
Starting at 4.
That's the only one where the time is different because there were so many.
So
Because it's a marathon.
yeah, I might have to be late for that because I have a thing before that. So June 17 here, marathon reading at 4. June 20, our next event in Rolla at the Public House. Julian King is our featured reader. And then we have open mic. If you haven't been to Rolla for the Poetry at the Pub, you should come and swell the throng. I'm trying to keep the series going through the summer, which is in a college town a little harder because there's no students. I mean, most of them are gone. So, and yeah, thank you all so much. Oh, by the way, people have books. Ken, did you have books? Did you bring copies?
I actually do, yeah.
Okay, so buy books. I see John has a whole book box. So if anybody is in need of books, people can oblige. So thank you all, and thank you, John, for having us, and good luck for next week.
Thank you.